Black people was already here.
The oldest people on the earth, in every part of the planet, they are all melanated beings.
We was owners. We owned everything. They took everything from our ancestors.
I'm African. My grandfather from Africa. They stole us and brought us here.
Stop trying to Africanize my people. Stop trying to Africanize my people.
You don't have to try to be something you're not.
Trying to be proud of my African heritage?
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois.
I keep bringing up these receipts of Native American indigenous hair texture right here. Check it out. You can say we from Africa all you want, but the truth is we was living in America. You understand?
Dr. King say the people find themselves in exile in their own land. He did not say they brought them from Africa and put them here. He said the people in their own land. I'm saying this to you as a civil rights leader to a civil rights leader. Dr. King was getting ready to embark, I think, upon some stuff that they wasn't ready for. Both of the truth was coming out. But now the truth's out with internet. The kids pulling up the pictures from the archives. They can't stop it now.
You belong here. This land belong to you. This thing that I heard is that the came from Africa. I have history.
Like you said, you never was told you were from Africa. So we was like, wait a minute, we may not be from Africa.
Well, yeah, if you wasn't born or raised in Africa, you know, I don't know no ancestors they just from Africa.
And a lot of them are saying something very similar, that they were never taught about Africa.
That's right.
We may not be from Africa.
They reclassified us. My great-great-grandma was an Indian. My great-grandma was an Indian. My grandmother was a My father is a color, and now I'm an African-American. Make that make sense.
Oh, they Indians. They mulatto, they black, they African American. That was to play divide and conquer so we wouldn't realize that we was the same people.
Brothers and sisters, there is something that we keep seeing more and more on the internet. You scroll and you come across videos of Black Americans who are claiming to be indigenous on the Americas. And then you go to the comments. It is a wall. Many of their fellow Black Americans are telling them that that is not true. You came from Africa. Just accept it. Now, when you look at how history is taught in Africa, in the Caribbean, in the Americas, most of Black American history usually starts with slavery. The story begins with Africans being captured from West Africa and then taken to the Americas. And while that part is real, documented, and undeniable, many of these Black Americans are asking whether that is the full story or something is missing. Because there are many videos where young Black Americans are going back to their grandparents, asking them what they were taught about Africa when they were young. Their answers are not what you expect. Some of them even say that they were never told anything about Africa when they were young. They claim that their history is only tied to the Americas, to their land. Now, let me be clear before we even go further. This video is not intended to erase any part of the well-documented history. The transatlantic slave trade is one of the most documented events in human history. Millions of Africans were taken across the Atlantic. That is a fact. But there are also many other discussions, books, historical arguments that says that there might have been many melanated people who were indigenous to the Americas. And one of the books that I've already recommended you before is this book that is titled They Came Before Columbus, that was written by Ivan van Sertima. I want us to really have a very open conversation about this. This conversation is not going to be about true or false. It's going to be about history, identity, and what many of us were taught in schools about Black Americans. This video is only for educational purpose. And if you're enjoying it, click on that like button.
This means, in the case of an American born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper of the Indians, when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. That the Indians were you.
New York was already there for thousands of years. San Francisco was there for thousands of years. Los Angeles was there for thousands of years. They were built by the indigenous people who were black and Indians as well. The black people, they weren't brought over by slaves. They are the original owners of America. Black people, African Americans. They don't come from Africa. They were already here. And
we was robbed and brought here. My name, my history, my everything was taken from me. Oh my God! Which year? Which year? I don't even know what. I can't speak the language. Look at me. So you telling me you African? Yeah. Okay, what country? What country you from then? Now that part during the slave trade we don't know.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here.
But so you telling me you African? Bruh. My great grandfather, well, yeah, damn right, they were. Your great grandfather is African. They African. They can't be beat. They stole us from Africa and brought us here. So you like American? You like America? I like my own people, but I'm stuck here.
God have mercy upon us.
You know what? You're not from Africa. Yeah, no. I am from Africa.
Black Americans, let me ask you a question. Are you noticing that I Show Speed is over there in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and you have black people over there, blacker than me, by the way, who are telling him they were the original indigenous before Columbus? Are you noticing there's no compilations about how those people over there are pretendians? Where are all the red-skinned Indians from here always lecturing us? Oh, you got nothing to say. You ain't said about Cheddar Man yet. You know, the black-skinned indigenous person over there in Britain who's got white descendants? They ain't said about I Show Speed and all the black-skinned indigenous people over there in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It is fascinating. The only time people want to shout out, pretendian, you don't know history. Oh, you don't know history. It's when it's foundational black Americans. But when everybody else say the same they suddenly fascinating, isn't it?
That's a bald-faced lie. He didn't discover no America, and the ship got in troubled water, and them black men was already here. The black people was already here, so they went out in that ocean and rescued Columbus off that ship. But they didn't have no knowledge, no learning or nothing. And then he came here and he put them into slavery. They saved his life. But he's a bald-faced lie when he said he discovered America. That's a bald-faced lie. If my black relative didn't went out there and to rescue his butt when that turbulence was tearing up them ships, he wouldn't have been here. So black people didn't know. All they knew was living off the land, and they didn't know how to fight for themselves.
Right.
He put the black people into slavery. And the big old giant. My grandfather was tall, and he wasn't afraid of nothing, and nobody, white or black, short or tall, fat or thin. He wasn't afraid of nothing.
What was your grandfather's name?
John Jordan. Everybody call him Johnny. John Jordan. Put the black people into slavery, and they got tight, and they fought their way out. They fought their way out of what he was.
And if you a black American, don't scroll. And you want to know why grandma never told you you were Indian? It's because in 1924, a guy named Walter Plicker reclassified people that was too dark to color, or reclassified them into if they were Indian. And he felt like they were too dark. And that same year, 1924, they made it illegal to call yourself an Indian if you wasn't an Indian on paper. Let me remind you, I just told you Walter Plecker reclassified black indigenous Indians as colored or because they were too dark. In that same year, they made it illegal to call yourself an Indian if you wasn't an Indian on paper.
Y'all, let's call my mom real quick and ask her where she come from and where her parents and her parents' parents come from. Mother!
Yes, daughter.
Happy birthday to you. Happy 75th birthday to you. Look, I got a quick question. I got to hurry and go to work. I got a quick question. We can't talk about all that on the video, but look, Mom, where are you from?
I was born in Newman, North Carolina.
And where Grandma from?
Cottage Park, Georgia.
And where is her grandma, like her mom and her mom's mom and all of them from?
They were born in Georgia, but their roots is in, where they moved to was Louisville, Kentucky.
So what runs in our bloodline? Like, what runs through our blood?
Cherokee.
Cherokee what?
And then?
Oh, so we ain't got African...
Well, you probably do.
So all of them wasn't born in Africa and brought over here on ships?
No. So, you saw that crazy.
So we was born, and everybody down our bloodline was born in America.
Yeah.
This thing that I heard is that came from Africa. I have history. Let me tell you. Here we go, baby. This my great-great-grandmama. She was born in the 1800s. Her name is Minnie Hauser. She's indigenous to America. This my great-great-grandmama on my father's side. And this her daughter in the red. And then the one in the green hat, that's my grandmama. So these are 3 generations of women that been here in America. From the 1800s, you can't tell me a goddamn thing. We indigenous to America. And the crazy part is how they staged all this shit and played in our face. And how we go along with it every day. They know damn well Donald Trump know exactly who we are. He went to that meeting back in the day. He told them they don't look like Indians to Indians. Here they got us calling us African Americans. They know exactly who they are. They know who we are. We don't know that they invaders. We don't know that they immigrants. They deporting everybody but they goddamn self. Ain't none of their great-great-great-grandmamas was here. None of them. And we sit and we work for these motherfuckers. We sit and we let them drag us. We let them do whatever they want to do to us. Why? Why do we let this white man control us the way we do on our land? Do you understand that the meaning of a damn copper color person is the true meaning of American? And then instead of giving it the rights to us, they gave it to the Europeans, the descendants. You read this, you get upset. And then you understand that nobody cares in the family. I'm talking to them. Nobody care about Minnie Hauser. Nobody care about her motherfucking problems what she went through. The stories came through in the family. This woman hated white people, white people. It's things that she seen happen to her parents, her grandparents. And then the one in the red left the reservation where she was born at. She was born on the reservation, baby. Let me tell you, all this Indian blood. Yamasee. They don't even understand what it is. You see calling yourself black. And Minnie Hauser. Look at her eyes. You know how much she's seen with those eyes? And us as the descendants of these people, we allow them to reclassify us and tell us what we are. But I tell you one thing, when my grandmother, Maddie, when she had my daddy, she was considered a color. And so was my daddy and my granddaddy, considered a color. A color. So you understand what happened with the color when they was reclassified? What were they before color?
Were you ever told that your family came from Africa?
No.
As far as you can remember, all your family is from where? Beaumont, and you said Moscow.
Mm-hmm.
So far, all your family that you know of is from Texas.
Yeah, right.
You never known you was from Africa. Like, nobody ever told you that, right?
No.
Right. But kind of a long history, we've been told that our family, our ancestors was enslaved, that they came from Africa, that they was brought on a ship over here from Africa.
Yeah, I know it's a story. It's a movie I saw.
Yeah, it's a story. Like they teach that in school, so people know it as being fact. Your mama or mother never told you that we were from Africa. Right. So that's what a lot of people, especially my age, were asking our grandparents about our history. So my generation, we're like, wait a minute.
But I'm American, and I'm proud of it, because one thing, we as black people have a lot we could be proud of, that we contribute to this country that you don't read about in the white history books, you understand? But there's one thing you know for sure, and that's that music, that sweet soul music. Everybody try to imitate us because they know where it's at. They know what's happening. They know we got soul, you understand? Even the Beatles started out that way. Can you dig it?
I am Cherokee Native American, born here in Virginia. I have no African heritage whatsoever and no African relatives. I am all Cherokee, and the Indian is black, actually. It's the same people that Columbus met when he got off the boat. And this is a message to really non-black people, but especially black people in general. If you see another black person tell you that their grandparents told them that they was Indian, who are you to doubt what they say and their whole family's lineage as if you know them? If everybody has this story all across America and we don't know each other, why do you think that is? If we know that there is a bill and a law that was introduced to reclassify Native Americans as black people, why would you think that we, everybody not knowing each other, would lie about that? And why do you think that there was Indian people everywhere all over America? Because we were already here.
The concept of us saying yo to one another is really basically coming from the Chalagi or Cherokee of saying oh shio, the way in which we dance, the way in which we walk. The walk in the 70s that many people thought was an Afrocentric expression, in actuality was a long-haired Cherokee warrior walk. The hip-like walk that is expressed as being Afrocentric was not Afrocentric at all. A warrior walked, and he walked with a limp, and his shoulder would dip as he walked. Now, that type of walk is not the only where in which you have seen that cultural expression is in America and by those who call themselves African American.
We do know that black people are both African and indigenous American, right? We know that millions of indigenous people were enslaved on North American soil, and some sent to the Caribbeans and West Indies, and most being women and children. We knew that, right? We know that only about 500,000 slaves came from the Atlantic slave trade, and only 5% of all enslaved Africans came to North America. We do know that, right? I think one issue that people have with this topic is that they conflate the Americas with the United States, when in reality, the Americas includes South America, the West Indies, the Caribbeans, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. I think another issue people have with this topic is that they don't realize that the United States didn't always belong to the United States. The United States only started off as 13 colonies. And these colonies used to belong to Britain. Not only that, the majority of slavery was only in the southern states. Slavery started in the Carolinas. The 7 proprietors who started slavery in the Carolinas came from the Caribbean, Barbados to be exact. So the vast majority of slaves in the American colonies, the British colonies, they still belong to Britain at this point, didn't come until the establishment of the Carolinas in the 1660s. In Barbados, there was already chattel slavery. So when the proprietors started the establishment of the Carolinas, they brought chattel slavery with them. Not only did they bring chattel slavery with them, they brought the idea of the enslavement of American Indians as well. This in itself would have to be a whole video, but basically this led to the Yamasee Wars of 1717, which is an American Indian group who fought with Carolinian settlers and basically was the start of racism in the colonies. A sage mentality was born. Oh, and let's not forget that lots of slaves were captured from Florida at this time, and Florida belonged to Spain until 1820. They were also enslaved and or sold to the Caribbeans and the West Indies. The rest of America was split between the Spanish and the French. All of this yellow part right here belonged to the French between 1520 and 1763. It was split into Lower Louisiana, which is where we know as Louisiana, then like Illinois County would be the middle of the country, and then Upper County, which was like the Great Lakes and whatnot. After 1763, which was after the 7 Years' War between the French and the British, all of the Great Lakes became British colony property. Also, the French sold their colonies to Spain. So Louisiana was owned by the Spanish from 1763 to 1803. And then briefly it was sold back to the French for like 6 months and then sold to America in what is known as the Louisiana Purchase. You can see we have Lower Louisiana, Upper Louisiana, which is Illinois County, and Upper County. The French enslaved tens of thousands of American Indians between the late 1600s and the early 1700s. The reason behind this is, for one, the French were broke. They were spending too much money on the development of other slave colonies, as well as wars with Britain. You had the Anglo-French War of 1627, and then the King William's Wars of 1689. That was just one of 4 wars. Yeah, they didn't have money to bring African slaves to the American colonies. So they enslaved lots of American Indians. The second reason this was made possible is because they had good relationships with certain American Indian tribes, mainly the Chickasaw, right? The Chickasaw captured thousands of Natchez people, sold them to the French settlers. Not just the Natchez, but the Choctaw too, and the Indians of the lower Mississippi Valley, as well as the Arkansas, Tanika, the Tonka, which in reality are all considered Natchez people. And you can look up the Natchez War of 1729 for historical reference. It wasn't until 1689 the French outlawed the use of Indian slaves. But like I said, the French were broke. So people continued to capture Indian slaves. They started calling them servants to avoid law. And then the rest of them, mainly men, they would sell to the South Carolinas, and the South Carolinas would sell them to the Caribbeans. But women and children were kept. It wasn't until the establishment of New Orleans in 1717 that New France got their first major shipment of African slaves. It really wasn't even that many. It was about 6,000. The increasingly volatile relationships between France and the American Indian tribes of North America are a large reason why they sold to the Spanish in 1763. British Louisiana and French Louisiana were vastly different. For one, the French were a lot like Britain, and they believed in chattel slavery. So slaves were born into slavery after capture, and they lived their entire lives. But, it's told that the French were nicer to their slaves than the British because they had slaves living in the home and they treated them more as kin. They gave them, religion and identity through whatever superficial shit they called slaves. Spanish slavery, on the other hand, was vastly different. The Spanish believed that slaves had inherent rights. So a slave could sue their master for improper treatment. Also, by the time that the Spanish had bought the Louisiana territory, they had outlawed American Indian slavery. So slaves, or Indian slaves particularly, would sue their masters in court for their manumission, which is their freedom, I guess. That's why there's so many historical records of, mixed race people or slaves suing their masters in Louisiana, because when Louisiana was taken over by the Spanish, it gave slaves, American Indians, and all types of people all types of rights in courts. This angered the French settlers because they were used to chattel slavery. They did not believe that slaves had inherent rights. So eventually, because Spain couldn't get their territory together, they sold it back to France, and France, still being in debt, sold it to the United States. Then we have the rest of the United States, which belonged to Spain, and the Spanish also enslaved thousands of indigenous people all throughout New Spain, which is, you know, modern day Mexico, Texas, California, New Mexico, etc. Spanish had these things called encomiendas, which gave like a lord land, and then in that land, all of the Indians around it became his property, or encomiendes, which is workers. So yeah, that practice continued from like the late 1400s to like the late 1500s. There was an official law put on the books to stop it, but even then it persisted. And then New Mexico broke off from Spain. They continued the enslavement of Indians. And then Texas broke off from New Mexico. They continued the enslavement of Indians. And then California broke off from Mexico, and they also continued the enslavement of Indians. And then one way or another, all of this land became U.S. territory. Chattel slavery took over everywhere that there was slavery allowed. And so American Indians were transported interregionally between states. And so eventually they were all just mixed in, all just considered Negro slaves, which created what we now know today as Black America. Yeah, so there you have it. I mean, honestly, this could literally be a 10-part series. If you guys want to know more, let me know. But this is like basically a general summary of it. Just for a recap, we got chattel slavery in the American colonies, chattel slavery of Indians in the French colonies, type of weird religious slavery of Indians in the Spanish colonies, and then the intermingling mixing of slavery as everything became U.S. territory in the Americas. There you have it. Black people are both African and indigenous.
So I'm strolling up down my timeline, right? Man, I ain't seeing nothing but my black people, my black Americans coming to knowing who they are, man, knowing who we are, man. This our land, man. We the true indigenous people. You know what I mean? Everybody claimed this and they claimed that, but everybody always knew who he was. You see what I'm saying? But I'm happy that my people are realizing who we are. You see what I'm saying? Go.
As you sit back and find out more and more and more of the truth, everything that they have ever taught becomes dismantled. They had a whole war with the Powhatan tribe over Pocahontas from 1600s to the 1700s. Then they migrated to North Carolina, and they had a war with the Tuscarora tribe in North Carolina, Chickasaw tribe, a couple other indigenous tribes in North Carolina. Then they migrated to Florida, the Seminole War. And they had the war with them, and that was the last of the Mohegan. And slavery ended. It really wasn't even slavery. We was prisoners of war. They found out how to use the Constitution to keep us enslaved.
The oldest people on the earth in every part of the planet, even in Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, America, they are all melanated beings. Going down to the Peking man of Asia, the oldest people are fully African. Going to England, Cheddar man, 10,000 years ago, the oldest man are African. Going into Russia, the oldest remains are African. The oldest remains of Italy, right? African. In Romania, and also in America, Lucia being an African woman, African people, we are the original people of the planet. And other people just came about 6,000 years ago. But it wasn't through evolution, it was through genetic engineering.
The blacks here, the original Indians, they got overthrown, right? They even put some of them into slavery and shit. Yet none of them now are getting any sort of land, getting any sort of, I guess, money. Dude, I live close to Temecula. Okay, basically I'm out here in Southern California. I have a friend. This dude gets $10,000 a month. This Siberian man. Okay, and you gotta think like that's fucked. Like this is one of the biggest secrets in history, man. And if you don't believe me, that the original or the aboriginal here, okay, the black Indian, that's not legit. Look at the Olmecs. Look at the Olmec heads, dude. Okay, they still can't even get a full carbon dating on the thing because of how old it is. Yo, there's 1,000 years of history missing. Look at the Olmec heads. There's braids on the...
Oh, y'all, they've been lying. Just watch this video.
People were already here. Does it make sense to go all the way to this other continent to bring people on a boat when we know that half of your stock is going to die? You wouldn't do that. So
Let me close my blinds because this about to get deep. I've been really thinking about this. It do not make sense to go all the way to another place to look for slaves when there's already people here. So if they enslaved the people here and the slaves were melanated black, the Native Americans are the black people. Okay, so when Chris first came to the Caribbean and he stole some natives, which is in South America, in his journal, he mentioned that Native Americans were black-skinned people. A voyager even said the Indians are very dark-complected, approaching black people. They have large lips, broad, flat, black-like nose, bearing strong resemblance to black people. It also said they had long, straight hair, so there's your evidence. Published by Vogue. So now I'm just thinking, who are these people? There's a lot of talk that they are descended from Mongolian people. I'm not gonna lie, it do look similar. Now there was also this situation called the $5 Indian, when people paid $5 to falsify documents declaring them Native Americans to reap the benefits. And then what they did with us, dark-skinned indigenous people who were called Indians or Indos, because they were dark, the United States legally unlawfully classified each as Negro. So they changed our ethnicity and said all of us was just Africans. This is a picture of a postcard of an American person back then. Now, before Caucasian people came, we all know specific tribes were beefing with each other. Now, what if the Mongolian people teamed up with the colonists, and because we was beefing to help enslave us, then they had a Thanksgiving to celebrate, and they end up getting backstabbed too, and outcasted to the West. There is evidence all around North and South America that black people were here. So tell me what y'all think. Stay dangerous.
So who are the blacks in America? Who are the black people in America?
The blacks been in America, been living here ever since. They are aboriginals. When you talk of America, my bro, never ever associate what America be with us anyway. For America, it's a mishap.
So are you saying that we didn't come from Africa?
No. And the people that live in West Africa were never there.
Indian, Cherokee Indian. When did you learn you was a Cherokee Indian?
My mother. With my mother at 3 years old.
Oh, so when you was 3 years old, your mother let you know?
Yes.
Have you ever been to some of the powwows that's out there?
Yes, I have.
What can you tell us about it?
Powwows, reunion of all the tribes, all the Cherokee Nation. We stick together like glue. We feed the nation of our people, and we take care of our people, and we never give up. I'll die an Indian, and that's it. I don't care what my complexion is. It doesn't matter. My kids are Indian, and I'm Indian.
So are you telling me, sir, that you are not African? You don't have no African blood or nothing?
I have no I don't know what my daddy was. He raped my mother, I guess. He stole a piece from her because she was pretty. Oh, incidentally, my mother was very fair, almost white, blue veins, red hair. But she still was a Cherokee Indian. She had no white in her at all. She's part of the nation. She's dead. She lived to be 89. Grandmother lived to be 90. Grandfather lived to be 110. I'm 85 and I'm going to try and beat my grandfather and go 112 if I can.
Beautiful. You're going to definitely make.
We didn't hear anything about Africa growing up within our household.
Okay.
We only knew what we saw on television. My grandmother never talked about, that we were from Africa or whatever. It was never taught in school. So we that wasn't a discussion for us.
Okay.
So that all we knew is what we saw on television, and the images we saw on television were always
the worst part. It was always the worst part of Africa.
Oh, wow.
We never really saw how beautiful Africa is, or was, or is, until we were older.
Okay.
They always showed us the worst part, where no shoes, no clothes, the big stomachs, the big bellies, the gnats and flies all in their faces. That's what we saw. That's what we were. That's what we were shown. And then, and if they wanted us to believe that we came from Africa, that was to me that was a way of telling us that this is where you came from, and this is where you should be now. That kind of thing.
Brothers and sisters, I hope you are doing well with your family. I just finished watching all of those clips, and it really took me a long time to really process what is being said. Not because it sounded crazy, but because it touched on something deeper than people are willing to admit. As an African who spent time reading, studying, and trying to understand the deeper layers of history, not just what is taught in school, I am not here to validate anybody's feelings. I'm here because there are patterns, questions, and gaps in the historical narratives that deserve to be taken seriously. And I want to talk directly to my Black American brothers and sisters, and to everyone watching this. What you have heard in those clips is not just people making noise. It's not some random Black people ranting on internet. These are people trying to make sense of identity, history, and their belonging. And that is why I want us to not be defensive, but open-minded while watching this video and while making comments down there in the comment section. One of the strongest points that came out in those clips is reclassification. And this is something that is historically real, even if many people don't fully understand the full impact of this reclassification. In the United States, racial labels have changed over time. Negro, colored, Black, and later African American. These were not just random changes. They were influenced by laws, politics, and social systems. There were also many cases where people who identified or recorded as native or mixed were later reclassified in broader categories like colored that later changed to Black. That happened in different states, especially in the early 20th century when racial classification became more rigid. You have seen it in those clips. Many grandparents were asked whether they used it to identify themselves as Africans before being classified as African Americans. And you have heard their answers. Many of those grandparents use it to identify themselves as Native Americans or mixed ancestry, but later, because of this rigid racial classification, they were reclassified as African Americans. So when families say that our grandparents told us that we are from this land, that is not something that we can dismiss. That is oral history. Even though oral history is not always precise, it carries memory that is passed down across generations. And I like the fact that many of these Black Americans are good at keeping these historical records, including pictures of their great-great-grandparents. They can easily trace their ancestry. And it's obvious if you see that many of your grandparents were indigenous to the land, then why are you being forced to classify yourself as an African American just because it was decided by some politicians? So it is not right to always dismiss these Black Americans, telling them that they are denying their African ancestry without really listening to them, their history, and the reasons why they are saying what they are saying. It is true that many Black Americans are connected to Africa because of transatlantic slave trade, but this does not give us the permission to dismiss those who say otherwise. Because many of these people, when they hear the term African American, they feel like this term does not fully capture who they are and where they come from, and they can understandably explain it to you. So why dismissing them? Where did even this term African American came from? The term African American became popular in the late 20th century, especially when leaders like Jesse Jackson encouraged its use to reconnect people of African heritage. And for many Black Americans at that time, that was empowering and it was embraced by many Black Americans. But for others, it raised a different question. What if my story does not start where this label says it does? Because the truth is, most Black Americans cannot trace their lineage to a specific African ethnic group. So if that is the case, doesn't that gap in knowledge create a space for questions, space for exploration, and sometimes space for alternative explanations? And that is exactly what we are seeing in those clips. So another point that was raised by many Black Americans in that video is the presence of Olmec heads that are said to have been created by Olmec civilization. These are real artifacts, and these artifacts are present in America. And when you look at them, the facial features, the nose, the broad face, the eyes, the lips, all of these features are associated with Black Americans. You can search for them on the internet and see how they look. The way the facial features are structured, it resembles Black Americans. Now, when you listen to mainstream historians, they will tell you that those artifacts represent Olmec people themselves. That is the accepted academic position. But shouldn't we interpret history through what we recognize? Because when a Black person sees those features, it creates a sense of connection. It challenges that idea that their presence in America only begins with slavery. And that is why I am making this video. Now, let's talk about something that is widely accepted in science. Human beings have been present in America for thousands of years, far before 1492. Archaeological evidence shows population living in North and South America 10,000 up to 15 years ago. For example, remains like the Luzia woman found in Brazil date back over 10,000 years. Scientists have debated her features and wide interpretations vary. What it shows clearly is this: early populations in the Americas were diverse, and human migration is more complex than a single simple story. Now, does that prove that all modern Black Americans are indigenous in America? No, but we cannot simply say that all Black Americans are African Americans, after understanding that there is a possibility of many of them being indigenous to the Americas. There is an author who was named Ivan van Sertima. He wrote a book that was titled They Came Before Columbus. Simply, this book did not just tell a story, it challenged the narrative. It brought attention to the possibility that there might have been interactions, movements, and presence that were not fully documented in the mainstream history. And this book made many Black Americans to question whether the history was presented in a complete way. I also want to challenge people who deny the indigenous nature of Black Americans. Around the world, there are many groups of people who are dark-skinned and that are considered to be indigenous to those regions, whether in parts of the Pacific, Asia, or the Caribbean, and that instantly give a space for Black Americans to raise their question. If Black populations can be indigenous to other parts of the world, why is this idea rejected so strongly in America? Now, scientifically, skin color alone does not determine origin. It is influenced by environment, adaptation, and long-term evolution. But most of the times, socially and emotionally, people don't always see it in that way. They see connection, they see similarity, they see possibility. And that's what drives this conversation. We all know that there were the presence of indigenous Americans in America. It is also true that many slaves were taken from Africa to the Americas, specifically the United States. And they were the presence of white people from Europe. And these people were all intermarrying each other, which means that they didn't remain separated from each other. African slaves had intermarriages with indigenous Americans there, who were classified as Indian Americans or Amerindians. And some of these people were also having kids with their colonizers. Now, doesn't it make sense when these people are saying we shouldn't be called African Americans, because they're not simply made of people who came from Africa. They are made of people who were indigenous, people who came from Europe, and people who came from Africa. Why only choose Africa and tag that African name on them instead of maybe calling them indigenous Americans or maybe any other name? Why are you choosing Africa and then you target on them for them to identify themselves as African Americans? It's not fair for these Black Americans to just be called African Americans. And any African who have really studied the history of these Black Americans, we'd easily understand where they are coming from instead of going in their comment section and start bashing them, telling them that they're not proud of their African ancestry. So if you've got any point, any addition, or any correction that you want to make, I want you to drop it down there in the comment section. And if you are a Black American and you are proud to be a Black American, I want you to show it by writing down there in the comment section, I am proud to be a Black American. And if that is hard for you, simply drop a black fist emoji down there in the comment section. Peace and love to y'all from your African brother. See you next time. Ciao.